Hello my friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family. I hope you guys are doing great today. So we're looking at the USGS. And the big one that sticks out right here is a 6.7, so that's pretty formidable. And it's 470.1 kilometers deep. So this is going to definitely push energy. This is a deep one. And at 6.7 in this area, generally, we are looking for an energy transfer over to Alaska across the Aleutians. And so, of course, from here, it could also push down into the northwest Pacific area and then eventually into California and into, the zones that we've always been worrying about, such as the San Andreas, Cascadia. This is a big quake at 6.7, and at that depth it could end up producing a shallow quake of around 7.6, 7.7. And a shallow 7.6, 7.7 in the wrong area, as we know, can claim many, many thousands of lives, possibly tens of thousands or more. So this is something to be aware of. Thankfully, Alaska is not too heavily populated. However, downstream from Alaska, then we're looking at, Seattle, Portland. We're looking at these areas in the Pacific Northwest, British Columbia, and then eventually down into California, which is extremely populated. And we know is, from what many sources would say, very overdue for the big one, as is Cascadia. Again, it's very, very dangerous. So this is something that made me say, oh, okay. Let's keep an eye on this, because this could definitely relate to pressure transfer over into the North American plate, and it definitely could generate something pretty large up in Alaska, or possibly farther on down the line into Cascadia, Pacific Northwest, and into California. Something to be aware of very, very much, and especially if we are anywhere on the West Coast. So 6.7, 470.1 kilometers deep. Again, that can translate to just about a full magnitude higher in a shallow quake. And shallow quakes, they shake the ground. And shallow quakes are what, destroy buildings and cause problems. The deep ones usually just transfer energy to somewhere else. So this is something of note. This is something to be aware of. Everybody on the whole West Coast, okay? So definitely be aware of this. And so out here, out of the watchers, deep 6.7 magnitude earthquake hits near Kamchatka. And this hit Russia at 11:10 UTC on October 13th. The agency is reporting a depth of 470.1 kilometers, 292 miles. And so, this area does have people. The closest cities have up to 40,000 people. Some 32,000 people are estimated to have felt weak shaking. Based on all available data, a destructive Pacific-wide tsunami is not expected. So, of course, if it was shallow, we'd have a different situation. But at that depth, it's going to move energy. And generally from here, the energy flows over to Alaska and then on down into the Pacific Northwest and ultimately California. So be aware of that. Indonesia, flash flooding kills at least 21 on Sumatra. Landslides, flash flooding followed heavy rainfall on the Indonesian island of Sumatra, and it has left at least 21 people dead, officials say. 11 of the dead were children buried when mud and water engulfed their classroom in the village of Muara Saladi in North Sumatra. Another 10 people are missing at the site. More than 500 homes in the provinces of North and West Sumatra have been damaged. The deadliest incident was at an Islamic village school in Muara Saladi. And so let's pray for those people. And they've gone through a lot over in Indonesia for sure. And as we said before, it's one of the more dangerous places on the planet for earth changes. And we have Storm Callum, 1 killed as Wales suffers the worst flooding in 30 years. You have a video here that you guys could go ahead and play. One person died in a landslide after Storm Callum hit as parts of Wales saw its worst flooding in 30 years. Rivers burst their banks, homes were flooded, some were without power, and travel was affected as Wales bore the brunt of the torrential rain and wind. And one person was killed after a landslide happened. And so, we're seeing this everywhere, as we've been talking about. It's just one spot after another on the globe. And this, unfortunately, is what we're going to be facing in these times. And we'll jump over to here. Now, jumping back to the States and jumping back to Hurricane Michael, the death toll is rising, but it might be a while before we get a decent idea on what the toll really was. And we'll never really know for sure, as there's just going to be a lot of people missing, as we already see. So we have 16 here as far as the official death toll. And it was interesting listening to Florida Governor Rick Scott talk. So he said it's like a bomb went off. This is Governor Scott saying as he toured the town of 1,000 people on the Gulf of Mexico Beach. Mexico Beach is devastated. It's like a bomb went off. And if you remember yesterday's video, we started out by taking a look at Hiroshima and taking a look at pictures of Mexico Beach. And, it was not easy to tell the difference right off bat, where you just take a glance at those pictures. Rescue teams are using sniffer dogs in Mexico Beach on Friday in search of victims who may still be buried under rubble in the debris-strewn community. Brock Long, head of the FEMA agency, expected the number of deaths to rise. Obviously, I hope we don't see it climb dramatically, but I have reason to believe we haven't gone into some of the hardest hit areas. What's happening is search and rescue is trying to get into the rubble and make sure there's nobody covered up, trying to assess if there are additional casualties there. Dozens of structures in Mexico Beach, homes, shops, restaurants, were lifted off their foundations by storm surge and 155-mile-an-hour winds, and move hundreds of feet inland or smash to bits. Very few people live to tell what it's like to experience storm surge, Long said. Storm surge causes the most amount of loss of life. State officials said Mexico Beach was under mandatory evacuation orders, but some residents decided to stay and try to ride out the storm. You hope that somehow at the last minute a bunch of people got up and left or went somewhere else, Florida Senator Marco Rubio told CNN, but judging from the number of homes reduced to sticks, he said, my sense is they're going to find more victims. Bob Tenbrinson, a Mexico Beach retiree, rode out the storm at his daughter's house in nearby Panama City and returned to survey the damage to his home. I was going to stay here until it turned to a Category 4, he said, so I followed the mandatory evacuation order and left with my wife. Luckily, we did not get a surge, he said of his home. I've got 2 trees on the roof and a couple of holes in the roof. I've been trying to patch it up as best I can. The rest of Mexico Beach did not fare as well. And most of the beachfront homes, restaurants, and stores were obliterated by the storm. I spent my life savings in retirement to stay here so I can sell it now, Tenbrinson said. I just have to be hopeful that the town will rebuild and fixed. Some residents arrived Friday with vans or moving trucks, hoping to recover as many personal effects from their splintered homes as they could. Others came with nothing, as there was nothing left to save. At least 4 deaths from the storm have been confirmed in Florida, 5 in Virginia, 1 in Georgia, and 3 in North Carolina. U.S. media on Friday quoted authorities in Jackson County, Florida, as reported 3 deaths there, bringing Michael's toll to at least 16. The 2 latest deaths in North Carolina occurred in McDowell County, where a car struck a tree that had fallen across the road. Hundreds of thousands of people remain without electricity in Florida, Georgia, and Virginia, and officials say it could be weeks before power is fully restored. President Trump said he planned to visit Florida and Georgia. People have no idea how hard Hurricane Michael has hit the great state of Georgia, he tweeted. I will be visiting both Florida and Georgia early next week. We are working very hard on every area and every state that was hit, and we are with you. Michael was the most intense hurricane to strike the Panhandle since 1851, when records began. So extremely intense, and as Rick Scott says, looks like bombs went off. That's a big statement, by the way. That's definitely a big statement, and it does look that way. And we have Hurricane Leslie near historic landfall in Portugal. Strong winds, heavy rain expected. Very, very unusual. A defiant Leslie is still a hurricane and is heading directly towards landfall in central Portugal on today, October 13th. Dangerous wind, surf, and heavy rainfall will affect Portugal and Spain. And Leslie is defying historical trends as it eyes Portugal and Spain. Not only is this rare trajectory, if Leslie makes landfall in Portugal, it'd be the first tropical system on record ever to do so, and only the second on record ever for the Iberian Peninsula. TWN meteorologists said residents of Portugal are likely to see one of the stronger storms in recent memory crash onto coasts on Saturday, early Sunday local time there. Life-threatening rough surf, hurricane-force winds, and up to 5 inches of rain are expected. Flash flooding as well will be expected. And so this is really, really unusual. And, you know, this storm is the storm that would never die. It's just been out there, it feels like, for over a month. I don't even know when it started, but it feels like it's been out there for a month. It's really crazy. And, you know, as we were talking about Michael too, you know, hundreds found by rescuers after Hurricane Michael, but many still missing. Death toll at 17. And honestly, you know, I've heard that there may be thousands that are literally missing that they don't know. So we really don't know what this is going to end up like. We really, really don't know what the final totals are going to be. And Hurricane Michael could worsen Florida's toxic red tide outbreak. This is not over. This red tide has not stopped at all. In fact, it's going up the Atlantic Ocean now. And as we were saying before, there are sources that say that this is like out into the Gulf, and that basically the Caribbean is being killed by algae as well, toxic algae blooms. And this is a much larger problem than what they are really letting us know. And so as Hurricane Michael made that devastating landfall in the Florida Panhandle, devastating the region, as we know, 155-mile-an-hour winds, tremendous storm surge up to 14 feet according to NASA. The storm could also trigger a welcome dissipation of the region's red tide, a 145-mile stretch of toxic algal bloom that has plagued the coastal states' marine wildlife and beaches since last November. It's been basically a year. Or it could do the opposite, generating excessive flooding that exacerbates the algae's harmful effects. In the past, it's gone either way. So, you know, all that water that surged in, bringing this stuff inland to where people are going to experience it, could also pull all sorts of toxic stuff back out into the water, which could end up spurring on more growth. So we really are going to have to wait and watch and see what happens. And it's really horrible. The dead zone, it did stretch from Newport Richey to Sarasota, was declared completely devoid of oxygen and marine life. Newport Richey to Sarasota, it's a dead zone, completely devoid of oxygen and marine life. That's pretty scary stuff to think of, you know, in the terms of things. And, you know, they've had red tide outbreaks before, as this is touching on. And, you know, what's going to happen? As we know, you know, or maybe you guys don't know, some that haven't watched this on a regular basis, watch this channel or some of the other channels, you know, a lot of the runoff, you know, from farming, a lot of the toxins and, you know, all this horrible material that really we shouldn't be using in the first place, you know, thank you to the corporations, it actually spurs on a lot of the algae growth. So not a good situation. And Hurricane Michael actually created new islands in Florida, as it basically flooded out some areas. And you could watch this video. Go ahead and play this video. It's not for rebroadcast, so you will get hit if we do play that with copyright infringements. But it actually so changed the land that it created new islands. Pretty interesting. I'll have all the links from you guys as always. And before we jump into the cold weather that is now going over here, we have a strong eruption of Fuego volcano. It's prompting evacuations in Guatemala. And this one, Fuego is the one that erupted and caught so many people by surprise, and was followed by a strong 5.7 magnitude earthquake that struck near the volcanic peak. We've seen some larger eruptions now. We're starting to see an uptick in the eruptions. And I'm, in particular, really keeping an eye on Hawaii again. There's a slight uptick in the earthquake activity over there. And as I was sharing with you guys, there was a lot of shallow ones going on right around Mauna Loa. So I'm keeping an eye on Mauna Loa personally. That's one I've been watching since Kilauea was erupting. So over 17 inches of snow fell in North Dakota, and it's only October. As Zeke barks, he's like, I want to go play out in the snow. I love snow. He actually does love snow. He gets all silly out there. 17 inches of snow in eastern North Dakota during a Wednesday snowstorm. And this is something that now we are seeing. And as I shared with you guys before, after what was left of Hurricane Michael blew by here, and we only got the outer fringes of it, man, the weather changed, and it's been a lot cooler all of a sudden. Over here we have lightning, flooding, and heavy rains in San Diego County. And in Coronado, several vehicles became submerged. We've seen an awful lot of submerged vehicles in this world now. Everywhere we look at, we're seeing cars getting swept away. And over here, Texas to experience record cold next week, solar variability and weather. National Weather Service is warning of a brutal weekend cold front that will include temperatures that feel way more like December to central and southern Texas, including San Antonio. So my friends there in San Antonio to Austin, I have some friends in that area. Also a little bit farther on down towards the coast. You guys bundle up. It's going to get cold out there. As we head for weather, it's going to be more like December. And we've been watching the Arctic sea ice as, we got our grand solar minimum people on one hand. We have our global warming people on the other side. And I'm watching this more curiously every day because what's going on with this? As our grand solar minimum people, we're so excited over here in July, where 2018 and the black line is heading into uncharted territory. Yes, the Arctic sea ice is building. Yes, the grand solar minimum is coming. They were just heralding it as if, the ice age is upon us. It's all snow and ice from here on out. And then it started to get abnormally warm. And then we had some of the Arctic experiencing temperatures in the 80s and 90s. Bizarre weather. And then, the Arctic sea ice starts to melt. According to this, it's dropping down, down, down. It's dropping less than 2004-2013 running minimum. Dropping down, touching 2015, and actually, being passed by 2015 now. 2017 has more Arctic ice than we do now. And right now it's taking a sideways jaunt, and it looks like it's going to cross over on the other side of 2016, which will mean that we have less Arctic ice than we've had going back to 2003. So is it just one little blip? Does this mean something totally else? I mean, does this mean there's volcanoes waking up, maybe up in the Arctic? Does this mean that the poles really are flipping, and they're flipping faster than we think? And maybe the coldest area is not up on the Arctic. Actually, usually if you look at it, it's mostly in Greenland when you get down to it. So if this continues and this jumps outside of this line, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be perplexed. And there's going to be a lot of people that are speaking for the global warming side that are going to say, see. But you know what? I mean, in my mind, there's a lot going on this planet. It's more than global warming. It's more than the grand solar minimum. There's a lot of different things going on at the same time. And, some people, don't believe that anything is being controlled by man at all. They don't believe in weather wars. I've seen some comments where people are saying, we don't have that technology. We can't affect that. Only God could affect that. But there's patents out there. They've been playing with the weather for 50 years, at least. And you know what? We have way, way more advanced technology than most people have a clue of. And then there's other influences possibly as well, as we've talked about Planet X, Nibiru, stellar cores, the Nemesis system, all these different things going on as well as a pole shift which is in progress. So this is extremely curious to follow, extremely curious. And honestly, I haven't had time to watch anybody's videos. I've had a lot of people saying, did you see this video? Did you see that video? I haven't had time to look at any videos. Just basically doing what research I can and get prepared as well. With the cold weather, coming, it made me realize, you know what, I don't got enough blankets. So I went out today and bought a bunch of blankets. So we're going to be good now till like maybe 20 below zero. So, and as well as stacking up firewood on the outside for the wood burning stove, because we may not have power. So have plenty of firewood. You got to really get ready. Now's the time to get ready as best as you can in every way that you can. And you know what? What's going on here is bigger than any one thing. There's a lot of things in play here. It's really very, very interesting to follow all this. It's actually downright fascinating to see it. And so, snowiest October on record for Calgary area. Already. It's October 13th. Already. You got snowiest up in Calgary. And again, North Dakota, record-breaking snow, harvest efforts hampered. That's the other side of this, food supply. Get yourself situated as best you can with that as well. Think long-term. And so looking at space weather, let's take a peek at what's going on. We saw a little bit of a rise in the KP index. It went up to 5 as far as geomagnetic activity. Dropped back down to a 4 right now. A few days back before this was showing, we did have some activity that ran up to a 5 as well. But everything is not really out of the ordinary. Now, over here, 5 things you need to survive in an urban environment after a disaster. And so most of our people are going to be in an urban or suburban environment. And so, there are different things that you have to take care of, depending on your situation where you are. You're going to have different variables as well. And so, disaster, that's a very open-ended term, as this says here. It could mean a whole variety of scenarios, from cyclone, hurricane, nuclear attack, plague, riots, power outages, and as we saw over here with Hurricane Michael again, that's a nice area. And yeah, you did have people out there looting. It doesn't matter. There will be looters in every area. It doesn't matter if you're in a wonderful gated community or, if you're downtown on Main Street in the middle of an urban metropolis, there's going to be looters. There's going to be people taking advantage of the situation. And so we have to think about those things that we need to survive and prioritize. Now a human can basically survive 3 minutes without air, 3 minutes of severe bleeding. And so, if it's a main artery, you only got 3 minutes or so at the most before you're out, lights out. In some situations, not even close to that. 3 hours in extreme cold or extreme heat. Shelter, obviously, is necessary. 3 days without drinkable water, or 3 weeks without edible food. Well, you could go much longer than that in reality without the food. So, while food is the priority, but, think about water. Think about water as well. And so, here now, I'm on a well, and so I haven't really had well water just once before in my life, So, one of the things to know is that, the well pump won't operate if the power goes out. So then you got no water. So you still got to store water, or you got to have a generator in this situation. Now, of course, if you're in a city, in an urban situation, you're going to be relying on them for your water as well. So again, how much water can you store? Rain barrels. And you know what? I'm going to go rain barrel shopping tomorrow, because there you could store a lot more water, and you're going to need more water than you think. If you think I'm good, I got like 2 or 3 of those 2.5 gallon jobs, that's not going to do it. You're going to need way more than that. And then many people do the trick of if they think something's coming, they fill up the bathtub. Well, that gives you a decent chunk of water, but you have to think in longer terms than that as well. And of course it takes up space. And if you're like me, who's been used to living in a 500 square foot place for the last 10 years pretty much, you're going to be limited in your space too. So there's a lot of things to consider here. Obviously air, very important. So depending on the situation, you might want to consider gas masks. I mean, many people do, because I'll tell you, we breathe a lot easier here now than we did before. And I've heard from a lot of people in Florida, and that's where I came from, and that's where the red tide is. That red tide is affecting a ton of people's health with that air, and it's really getting into the lungs, it's getting into the sinuses, it's causing all sorts of breathing issues. Whether you believe in them or not, chemtrails are real. They are real. Just went into the city, quote unquote, today, and while when we're out in the country, maybe you'll see something that looks like a chemtrail cloud here or there, one here, one there. You go into the city, it's grid work, it's patchwork. I mean, 90% of the clouds are chemtrail clouds. Why are they spraying over the urban areas? Are they doing it to protect you guys from the UV? The magnetosphere is down at least 20% right now. We know UV is up at least 14 to 18% in most areas. And so are they doing it to reflect out that energy to protect you? Or is there something else going on? Because so many people get sick. Seems like people get more sick in the urban areas. And of course, there's more pollution in the urban areas as well. But air, you need air. Basic first aid. You definitely need basic first aid supplies. Don't forget those things. Also, don't forget things such as, having a lot of blankets and just basic things like that. Or fuel. So, again, we've talked about generators, fuel, we've talked about fireplaces and wood-burning stoves, things like that. There's so much to really, get grips on and all. And, obviously air is prime. And, unfortunately, with this world, you have to be aware of this stuff. And this has a video you guys could play, and it starts off talking about toxic haze in Moscow. And China has so much pollution that it's taking years off of people's lives right there. And, there's other types of issues as well that can develop. So again, NBC masks, things used by the military, first responders, you might want to invest in it. And again, first aid courses. How many of you guys have taken first aid courses? Have you? Get yourself acquainted to what to do in situations like that. CPR, first aid, all the basics, and have a kit so you have everything covered. Obviously, shelter. What happens if there is a fire in your main shelter? Where would you go next? Do you have a neighbor that you could count on? Family members you could count on? Is there a second building or a shed or a garage on the property in case something happened? And just try to think about all the different situations that can come up. And safety and security in urban areas. And as it says, while there's generally no dangerous wild animals in urban areas, security can most definitely be an issue in urban areas. And it gets into weaponry and guns, which we have not talked about on this channel before, really. And it's just something that's obvious and self-evident. And it's up to each person to make their own decision on things along those lines. And as I know, there are many people here that are vegan and vegetarian, and then there's some people that aren't, and some people that can actually, can and do go out and hunt on a regular basis. And so, obviously in these type of scenarios, the people that are used to being out in the woods will have an advantage in many ways. People that are homesteading, are used to hunting and fishing and things like that, you know, living off the land a little bit more, they're definitely going to have an easier time of the transition than those that don't. And so that's something else, you know, for everybody to consider, you know, each going with their own personal beliefs. And, you know, just be aware that those with the commodities, those that have the good stores of food and of water and things like that, they may become targets for those that don't and that are a little bit more unscrupulous. So, you know, this just gets into a few things there that we haven't touched about, but go ahead and I'll have the link for you guys as well. You know, obviously, now is the time for everybody to be finishing their preps, you know, and, you know, to be thinking ahead as well. As we look at these people, and I just noticed this, with their masks on, as they're going through and picking through what's left. So, my friends, be safe out there. Make your plans. Be prepared. As always, please do thumbs up to support the channel. Thank you so much for your support and growing with us and sharing with us all you guys are doing. Please do comment. Share with each other. That's so important. Share, share, share. You know, on everything that you're doing. And we'll have more live streams as well, so you guys could share amongst each other what you're doing. Reach out to each other. Find other Evolutionary Energy Arts family people in your area. And I know many have become good friends through this channel. And as always, may you guys be blessed with abundant peace, love, health, happiness, and all well-being. Stay safe out there, my friends. Namaste, and God bless.